I think I got to admit, I have a problem. It's not drugs, it's not alcohol, it's not gambling. It's Craigslist-driven insomnia. The other day, I was looking in rural Wisconsin for whatever reason, and I found a 1982 Yamaha XJ750 motorcycle, otherwise known as a Maxim. And what's special about this is it was my first motorcycle, except this particular one wasn't. And my first thought when I saw this is, man, I haven't seen one of these in 10 years. It's the right color, it's about the right year, it's got the right headlights, which they only did for a couple years. But I know it's not mine because mine had an ostrich seat, and apparently it was handmade by some big name. I don't know who he was, but he must have been the guy for ostrich seats, because everywhere I took this thing, people would say, oh, is that one of so-and-so's seats? And I would say, yeah, I guess it is. I don't know. It sat my butt just fine, so I never thought too much of it. Anyway, that's how I know this is not my bike. Plus, it's in the middle of absolutely nothing in Wisconsin. The odds are low that my bike would have run that long to get up there. But nonetheless, my first reaction was like, oh man, that'd be really cool to have, like, basically my bike back in the stable again and be able to ride it and look at it and, like, just have another one. It's been 10 years since I've seen one that was the same color and almost the same year as mine. I think mine was an 83. But then I got to thinking, like, do I actually want that particular bike, or do I just want the one that I had? In other words, would it be worth having the same bike if it wasn't actually the same bike? I'd love to know what you think about this perplexing question that will baffle the world's best scholars for generations, undoubtedly. At that time, especially as my first motorcycle, obviously as my first bike, it represents freedom, it represents riding and learning to ride and becoming a better rider and passing my motorcycle exam and all these other things. It reminds me of that fall afternoon when I got dropped off at my apartment by my friend who had ridden the motorcycle there for me from the next city over because I didn't know how to ride, or I couldn't ride that well. I'd ridden in a parking lot, but I didn't have my license yet. He dropped me off and he said, I have to go to work. And he left me standing there in the parking lot with my new motorcycle, and I had no one there to teach me. And I was like, this doesn't work. So I set about teaching myself. I already knew the basics, but I taught myself enough confidence at least to get out of the parking lot and go ride on the road. It was a long afternoon, but I didn't drop the bike. I ended up making it all the way to campus where I rode around and I felt like the king of the world, like the badass on a motorcycle. And then I rode home and I knew that my life had been changed in that moment. And that energy is what that bike means to me. But a different one wouldn't really have that energy. Would it? I don't know. I haven't bought the bike. I don't know if that's how it works or not. If I saw that exact bike come up again, obviously it's going to have lived a life, in the past 10 years. It's going to be in different condition or what have you. But I would do all I could to buy it back. In fact, a couple months ago, I saw one of my dad's cars. It was a Nissan Stanza, and I know it was his because this is a pretty small town, and this was a maroon on maroon Stanza. And he even agreed. I showed it to him on Marketplace, and he said, oh, that's my old car. And I thought, I gotta get it. Well, I messaged the guy, and it had already sold. It got me thinking, like, obviously I would purchase a car that has sentimental value from my past or my family's past if I had the chance. And I was privileged enough to have the opportunity, obviously. Life doesn't always work that way. But if I was lucky enough to be in a place where I could do that, I would want to. I wouldn't just go out and purchase any old Nissan Stanza and, act like it was the one from my childhood. I want the exact same one that I rode down that big roller coaster hill at the house I lived in when I was like 7 years old. And my dad would coast all the way down this. It was like a 30 mile per hour zone, but he would go like 45 or something, and it felt like he was going 100 when you're 7 years old and you're in the back seat. We'd hit the bottom of that hill and my stomach would drop, and I felt the G's and the adrenaline. That was what made me feel alive when I was a kid. Memories like that are what tie me to that car. I wouldn't just be able to get that out of any old Nissan Stanza. It would have to be the one. You could get close with a different one, I think, but for me it would have to be the one. I mean, there's no replicating that. Anybody out there who has a car from their past or their family's past, do everything in your power to hold on to it. Maybe you're not all that into cars. Maybe you don't really know all that much about the car, but I promise you there is a connection there that is unlike any other. You should do all you can to keep hold of that for as long as you possibly can. My first car was actually a 1988 Honda Accord. It was a four-door, it was white. What was left of it was white. It was used to deliver pizzas for about 300,000 miles, and as far as I could tell, was used to deliver drugs for about 25,000 after that. The inside was an interesting mix of debris and just weird pungent odors. Believe it or not, I didn't know how to drive a stick at that age. Try as I might, for some reason I could not learn on that car, and we ended up selling it because I couldn't learn how to drive a stick. And I have seen a couple of them come up, and I've always thought it would be cool to have one. And you know what, now that I say that, I guess it matters what car it is, because I would love to have the experience of an 89 Honda Accord, like the pop-up headlights, the utility of the interior. It was, again, that maroon interior that I seem to be gravitating toward in my life. That's one I would entertain having again. The car after that was a Mitsubishi Galant, and to be honest, I could do without having one of those again, so maybe it matters what it is. I think a lot of us have that nostalgia, We want the energy of the past. We don't necessarily want the utility of the past or the items that allowed that reality to be a thing. I don't necessarily want to have to go back to a CD player that skips in my pocket or doesn't even fit in my pocket. I don't necessarily want to have to go back to 32 gig of storage on a phone being the world's largest phone. I don't want to have to go back to 32 meg of RAM. I don't want to have to go back to a lot of things, but I like the memories from those times just the same. It's a past that we sometimes would love to live in, but we often forget that modern conveniences make the modern age a lot better than it was 5 minutes ago. And so going back to the 80s, going back to the 90s, even going back to the early 2000s means changing in fundamental ways. And maybe that's part of the allure, is the simplicity of those times. The ability to walk away from our phones, to walk away from modern technology and the ways of the modern world, the stresses of everyday life, and go back to a simpler time. Perhaps that is part of what's wrapped up in these automobiles, these motorcycles that we had at the time. But maybe it's not that. Maybe it's just that we really liked them. And if circumstances had been different, we wouldn't have gotten rid of them. What was your first car? Would you have it back? And if you couldn't have that specific car, would you have another one? The same obviously goes for motorcycles. If you ride, would you have your first bike back? Would you have one just like it? Would it be the same? Let me know what you guys think in the comments. And let me know if you like this different style of video, just chatting and hanging out. Take care, have an awesome day, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye. And for anyone asking, no, I'm not buying the Maxim. I wish I was, but it's just not the right time. Sometimes it isn't, and that's how life works.